Hola amigos, coming up in this episode.
Now there's an unusual lighthouse, if in fact it is a lighthouse, but take a close look just how desolate it is. Not a cactus, not a blade of grass. And they had this statue of a deer, but maybe it's a llama, I'm not sure. The next stop was a really weird rock formation. And these circular structures, what are they? They're called huayrachinas. Huayra meaning wind in the Quechua language. So I'm in northern Chile, in the arid Atacama Desert. In the last episode you saw how I camped in a ruined saltpetre extraction plant right beside the PanAmerican Highway, but basically in the middle of nowhere. I covered my bike in a green drop sheet just to camouflage the reflective stickers from the headlights of passing traffic. Early in the morning I packed up and set off, weary of getting a puncture because this site was littered with rusty nails and broken glass. So, goodbye to Ruinas Britannia, hello to the open desert road. Unfortunately, there was no way for me to recharge my helmet cam battery, so no road footage today, sorry about that. First stop was to record another milestone, or rather a kilometre stone. I now have clocked up 3,000 kilometres. That's a bit over 1,800 miles. So I stopped and took a photo, but take a close look just how desolate it is. Not a cactus, not a blade of grass. In fact, in some parts of the Atacama, it hasn't rained in over 500 years. Next, there was a couple of quite isolated buildings. A rusty corrugated iron shack and a lodging house called Las Bombas. A bomba in this context means a pump, and it could have been a water pump or a petrol pump. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Then came a straight stretch. Even though some people might call this featureless and desolate, I still found it spectacular and worth stopping to take a photo. Then the PanAmerican Highway veered west towards the Pacific Ocean. But first I needed to buy gasoline, and the first station had none, but the second one did. This town is called Chañaral, and they had this statue of a deer, but maybe it's a llama, I'm not sure. It was a pity it was so cloudy and windy, but that's a common phenomenon all along the South Pacific coast of South America. A bit like San Francisco, there's an almost perpetual fog in the mornings here due to the cold Humboldt current offshore. Now there's an unusual lighthouse, if in fact it is a lighthouse. I think it's a lighthouse. You can see here how the wind has blown the sand up the sides of those hills. Now the highway hugged the rocky coastline, and it was quite exciting to ride around here. And again, it's very hard to imagine how people travelled in the days before cars or horse and carts. How did they travel along the coast here? But they did somehow. Well, one thing that they did have was llamas and alpacas who are related to camels and can travel long distances without water. Here in this photo you can see the ruggedness of the coast as well as the fogginess. Heading further south, still hugging the coast, the next stop was a really weird rock formation. The sign says Campos de Tafonis and Zoológico de Piedras. That loosely translates as Field of Tafonis and Rock Zoo. Tafonis are a rare type of rock that weathers on the surface, leaving a pockmarked appearance. And it usually happens around coastal areas where there's a lot of sun, wind and salt. The Rock Zoo refers to some of the formations behind here that have been shaped by the wind to resemble heads of animals. You see in the front of that boulder there is a sign that says Difunta Correa, the deceased Correa. Difunta Correa is an unofficial saint, a woman who in the early 1800s trekked across the desert in Argentina, died of thirst, but she was walking with a little infant, and the people that found her the next day found the infant still suckling at her breast, and supposedly miracles have been assigned to her name. And all around Argentina and Chile there are these roadside shrines to her where people leave bottles of water in remembrance of her. You can see here there's letters and other votives for miracles that have been assigned to her name. Just then a truck pulled up with what looked like a huge circular bearing. Time to get a move on. The PanAmerican then turns east and passes through the town of Copiapo. But there I left the PanAmerican and followed a country back road to the village of Los Loros, where I made inquiries in Gringo Spanish for a place called Centro Metallurgico Incaico, which translates as the Incan Metallurgical Center.
But when I got to that tiny little town of Los Loros, nobody seemed to understand my Spanish. But then I got talking to a lady and she said, oh yeah, that's where they used to sacrifice to their sun god. And she made a gesture like that, like someone's been crucified. Yeah, it's just down the road. It's called Cerro del Viña. The name I promptly forgot and I had to do a few U-turns looking for it, but eventually I did see a sign that said Cerro del Viña. I rode up and investigated it, and there it was.
Why did I make this huge diversion to come here? Well, many years ago I saw it marked on a map by legendary Australian cartographer Kevin Healy. And as in my youth, I'd always been involved in mines and mining, and it's always intrigued me, gold and Incas. What is this place marked on the map? An Inca metallurgical centre? And now I'm finally here, a place where pre-Hispanic people smelted copper ore. That constant afternoon wind was one major factor why they chose this place. It negated the need for bellows, which they didn't have anyway. Those buildings over there were the workshops where the ancient coppersmiths lived and ground the copper ore. And these circular structures, what are they? They're called huayrachinas. Huayra meaning wind in the Quechua language. They were like miniature blast furnaces fueled by wood or dried animal dung that reduced the copper ore. Originally, they would have stood about chest high and had a central chimney with clay crucibles surrounding the chimney. One old chronicle documents that in the silver mining district of Bolivia, over 6,000 of these huayrachinas could be seen burning at night. And although the Spanish soon changed the way they refined ore, in Bolivia the use of huayrachinas still survives. Here at this site there are the remains of 26 huayrachinas, a number that may be linked to the lunar calendar. That building is thought to be the control point. You can see it has a low wall, probably as like a corral for llamas. The Diaguita ethnic group, who were subjects of the Incas, chose this spot for 3 reasons. One is it's located in a deep valley, so the afternoon winds whistle down here, providing ample oxygen for the charcoal hearths. And the Copiapo River Valley was also a major travel route for llama caravans that travel between the coast and the Andean highlands. So it was like a logistical hub. And now you might see a big picture emerging, because in episode 18 I spoke about the mummified copper miner and how Pedro de Valdivia, on his expedition here, was able to obtain copper to make horseshoes with relative ease, and how his scribe Vivar said the local women wore up to 10 copper earrings in each ear, and how today modern metallurgists are still stumped at just exactly what technique they used to temper their copper to reach such great durability. When Valdivia arrived in Copiapo, he was gifted copper pieces and bags of gold dust and gold grains. The gold dust probably came from Quillota, near present-day Santiago. A llama caravan could cover that distance in around 22 days. The Incas often mixed gold dust with copper to make an alloy called tumbaga. Not only did it melt at a lower temperature, making it easier to cast, but it was also more durable and also more malleable than either pure copper or gold. So how much copper from here ended up mixed up with gold, then seized by the conquistadors and shipped to Europe? Evidently, hundreds of tons. There is a ushnu platform, a hallmark of Inca occupation. So what we're looking at here is a pre-Hispanic industrial estate with its own ushnu platform for religious ceremonies. Ushnus were often the sites of adoration of the sun and ritual sacrifices. So that lady in Los Loros, she was actually correct in her description about sacrificing to the sun god. You only have to look at Waman Poma's chronicle, which is quite clear that ushnu platforms were for sacrifices to Inti, the Inca sun deity. And there is evidence that they were used for communication, using smoke signals or coloured banners or flags up and down different valleys. But ushnu platforms were more than just that. Here in Cerro del Viña, these seemingly mundane mud and stone constructions also served as a calendrical calculating device, what they call a solar horizon calendar, as the walls and the windows of these buildings aligned with summer solstices and solar zeniths rising over nearby sacred mountains. You wouldn't want to know what might actually be buried inside that ushnu platform. In some parts of the Inca Empire, skeletons of human sacrifices have been found buried inside these ushnu platforms, often in the corners. The wind really builds up in the afternoons here. So time for me to head out of here and find a place to stay. But not before stopping to take a photo of these flat, pale green areas, which I guess is plastic netting covered to save crops from damage from the sun and bird damage. And as you can see from those barren mountains, if it wasn't for irrigation pumped up from the Copiapo River Valley, it would still be pure barren Atacama Desert. Los Loros had no vacant rooms that I could find, so I retraced my route all the way back to a town called Tierra Amarilla, which means yellow earth, where I found a place to stay at this place, the Residencial Antonella, and this was my first and only meal of the day.
That's all for today, amigos, but coming up in the next episode we have...
Finally, there's a bit of vegetation. In Spanish, wind turbines are called turbinas eólicas. Aha, the deep blue South Pacific. This establishment names and shames people that owe money going back several years. Oh, she's given me the evil eye.
But when I read the contents of the email, it was terrible. The kind of news nobody ever wants to get.